Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with Pro Wrestling Logic, and we continue our TNT review. We go back to the farm with Granny this week, which this week is February 22nd, 1985. We are just about a month and a couple of weeks away from uh, WrestleMania 1. So, a really interesting time in the historic nature of pro wrestling. Certainly a very big time for the McMahon family as a whole. Obviously, we go back to the farm with Granny. Granny talks about having watched the match with Hillbilly Jim and Terry Gibbs multiple times, watching it all the time, she says, which I find hard to believe because VCRs were very expensive in 1985. But we go back to the barn, and I think this is where we milk the goat. I think I mentioned that last episode. I was blending the episodes, to be completely honest. But Lord Alfred Hayes milks the goat on this particular episode. More talk of, just kind of hillbilly really working hard and getting ready to do good things and all that stuff. We actually also do see Swede Hansen at the dinner table, and goat's milk is offered to Hansen, called a some sort of wine. All the victuals used several. The word victuals used several times in the episode are prepared by Granny and to the liking of her guests. McMahon in various types of animal feces is an interesting look for a multimillionaire at the time. Now, former billionaire back to multimillionaire. Wonder how he feels about some of the things he did during the TNT years. It'd be an interesting thing if anybody would ever get a full on interview with him, which I obviously don't think will ever happen. But then we move on to Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Neidhart, who comes out of the Calgary Stampede area. Stampede, obviously run and operated by Stu Hart for several decades up in the Calgary, Canada area. And I'm pretty sure that Stu trained Neidhart. I know he trained Brett, and I know he trained his sons and various other wrestlers over the years, but I'm 95 to 98% sure they trained Jim Neidhart. But anyhow, Neidhart shares his thoughts on Hillbilly Jim, which are anything less than pleasant. Neidhart is shirtless and really muscular looking. I just mentioned shirtless because it's really bizarre to come out and do an interview with no shirt. I guess Morocco does it in a couple of episodes, but it's just one of those things where a little different, a little different. Um, and oddly enough, Mr. Fuji is the manager of Jim the Anvil Neidhart in this early 1985 episode. I don't know how long this lasts. I know that he's moved on to Jimmy Hart over the next few months. Of course, Hart comes in right before WrestleMania 1, so maybe the idea was Hart wasn't coming in, or they didn't know that Hart was coming in, and they moved Jim once they established that Jimmy Hart was coming in. Hart, Bret Hart, and Jimmy Hart, no relation, and Jim Neidhart, of course, eventually formulate the Hart Foundation. But really interesting that Jim Neidhart, during his interview segments, which goes across a couple of segments, mentions and talks about the shock put and the discus throw and various other events that he does in the power lifting and the hammer throw, and that's where he gets the Neidhart name, or the anvil name, the anvil toss and all of that. Says he's a world record holder. Don't know the validity of that, but I'll believe him because I wouldn't want him to beat me up. Of course, he's since passed away. R.I.P. to Jim Neidhart. So many guys from this era have passed away so young. It's sad to look back and see that the heroes of a, you can call it a cartoon era if you want to, but the fact of the matter is people remember the guys and girls from this era more than any. And I think it's because their characters are unique, but so many of them have passed away. It's just really sad. There is a enhancement match for Neidhart on this program. Rather nondescript. He uses football tackles and the like, as would be expected by a power guy who does have former NFL and CFL, I'm pretty sure, experience. I know he has NFL experience, though. And he uses a leaping power slam, which is different than the power slams I really get into just stylistically. And my favorite power slams are Buzz Sawyer and Ted DiBiase. But um, the jumping aspect, which is brought up by the announcers of Neidhart's Power Slam, makes him really, really different, and unique and interesting, and just it stuns me because I remember Neidhart being by '89 when I was a fan a little bit more plodding and moving slowly, but here he's jumping around like a kid, and it's kind of interesting. Um, you know, Jim. Yeah, I almost called him Jim Albano. Lou Albano up next. Lou Albano, obviously managing by this point 14 or 15 tag team champions, and expresses adulation for the new tag team champions, um, the U.S. Express. Of course, here's an American. Here's an amazing thing. An American thing? No, not yet. An amazing thing, and that is that the U.S. Express originally was going to be known as the American Express, but depending on who you believe, there was either a phone call or some sort of exchange, maybe a cease and desist letter of some sort, by American Express, the credit card, who says, "Hey, Mr. McMahon, you can't do that." A little known trivia for folks that weren't around at the time, that the credit card company was not impressed with having wrestlers named after their product. In any event, Albano explains that he wants to get his hands on managing the champions. He thinks they're the future. He's very excited, and of course, having managed almost half a dozen tag team champions by this point, he would have reason to be excited. Um, and then we go into the match where, and I mentioned this a couple of reviews ago. I'm pretty sure it was a couple of reviews ago. They do defeat Murdoch and Adonis. The Bulldog being used primarily, and the match is in clipped form. I don't think I've ever seen the full title switch here, but the fact that it's in Hartford, Connecticut kind of stuns me. I don't know why they would go to Hartford and not do it at the Garden, either Boston Garden, Madison Square Garden, Philly Spectrum, one of the main circuit towns. Maybe they were trying to get house show business up with the anything can happen in the WWF vibe. I don't know. It strikes me as odd. Another thing that strikes me as odd is that they do kind of a bit of, um, you know, promotion, and there are fans that are all over the new champions, Rotundo and Wyndham. Of course, they are brother-in-laws, but at this point, they're heartthrobs too. Albano does, kind of admit that he's involved with them and proud of them and all those good things. But what I found interesting in this scenario, and maybe it's just because Barry Windham was quiet at this time and hadn't found his voice, but the majority of talking that isn't done by Albano is done by Mike Rotundo. And Rotundo, especially as a babyface, is not a predominantly strong talker by any stretch of the imagination. Just not there. Not a guy that I'd say is the voice of excitement. He's relatively plain, relatively nondescript, and kind of like, what are we doing here? And then we go to three segments that are just to fill time. There's not really a lot to see here. Various segments for the last 5 to 7 minutes of the program. Let's see. Yeah, about 10 minutes of the program before they close it. With post the Albano interview, we go to about 7 or 8, 9 minutes with the granny feeding various dishes to Lord Alfred Hayes and Vince McMahon, and Swede Hansen, who isn't with the company very long, most known as a Southwestern star, also known for doing very much inappropriate things with children and getting kicked out of wrestling later on in life. You can research that if you're interested in what happened there. I won't go into great detail because this is a G-rated channel, but yeah, not a popular guy for his conduct with various people in and outside of the business. And another, really strong push for Hillbilly Jim. I honestly think they had more plans for Jim than they actually got to utilize. Just a gut feeling, though, because he got a lot of TV time at the time. In any event, that is the review for this episode. We've got more of that coming up. Like I said, I've watched through about August or so we'll have those up in the next couple of days. In any event, if there's a series you'd like to see, comment below. But until then, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Till next time, everybody.